Another immigration story for grade 5s. This one's called This is a Rope, and it's a story about a migration. So it's the moving of a people group within a country, in this case African Americans that went from the south to the north, and you would have heard that in Underground, reading this novel Underground to Canada. In this case, all of them moving mostly for work, coming from the south where they were slaves and working in fields to going to the north where they could find different jobs. And it's called This is the Rope, and I have a rope here that I always like to think about with this story, to use with this story, because it's a well-worn rope, and it makes me wonder what kinds of work this rope has all done. And in this story, we follow the family immigrating by talking about the rope that they take with them. It's by Jacqueline Woodson. Jacqueline Woodson is an African-American picture book and novelist. She writes for young people. And James Ransome is also an African-American illustrator. This is the Rope, a story from the Great Migration. And there it is, the piece of the rope. And it says, there's a lot of history here, but I'm just going to read the shorter one. This book is dedicated to more than 6 million African Americans who left the unjust conditions of the South for a better life in the North, from the early 1900s until the 1970s. My mother and grandmother were among them. I thank you all for your courage and for making a way out of no way. This is the rope my grandmother found beneath an old tree a long time ago, back home in South Carolina. This is the rope my grandmother skipped under the shade of a sweet-smelling pine. This is the rope my grandfather used to tie the few things they owned to the top of the car that drove my grandmother, who was a mother now, from South Carolina, all the way to a place called New York City. This is the rope my grandmother held tight to as my grandfather drove real slow past the people and big city buildings that seemed to go on and on. This is the rope that my grandmother used to dry the sweet-smelling flowers she grew in small window boxes, reminding her of the flowers back home, where the land, she said, went on and on. This is the rope my grandfather strung so that my mama's diapers could blow dry in the hot city breeze. This is the rope my mama tied around a small ducky's neck, then pulled it along, singing quack, quack, quack. This is the rope my mama held out to the girls on our block, on her block, the new block, Brooklyn, a home of their own that they finally owned. And Mama asked shyly, "Anybody want to play?" This is the rope my mama first tripped on as she sang with her friends. Miss Lucy had a baby and she named him Tiny Tim. This is the rope my mama's brothers took from her room for some crazy game that little boys play. This is the rope my mama found again 10 years later when grandfather said, "We need a bit of rope to tie these things down inside this here car, like that rope we used to have from way back home." Then he drove with my mama off to college, far away from the city, while up at the window, my grandmother waved. This is the rope that my mama placed on the piano around all the family photos and me, just a baby, and then bigger, already reaching for it. This is the rope my daddy used when he showed me the way to tie a sailor's knot. 2 times around and pull it real tight. You want whatever you make or do in your life, my daddy said, to last. This is the rope my mama turned as she waved to my daddy and taught me to sing that Miss Lucy song out on our sidewalk right here in Brooklyn, just last Friday night. This is the rope that held up the sign saying, "We are all family," at our picnic reunion in the big park up the street from our home. This is the rope, threadbare and graying, that I traded with my grandma for a brand new one, and then I jumped a new jump. My name is Beatrice. I come from Brooklyn. As my family smiled proudly, and the sun began setting, as Grandma held on to her rope from way back home, and her long ago memory of sweet-smelling pine. And that is, this is the rope.